Now it's time for us to draw our columns down in the basement. Now it's always important when we're drawing our columns down in the basement to understand where their spacing should be so that we know their exact locations as well as what their structural properties might be. And we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. So to begin with, I'm going to come up here to the Annotate tab and I'm going to select on Detail Line. Now I'm going to draw a line from right here and I'm going to draw this down 6 feet. What this drawing the line down is going to indicate for us is how far off of this wall that we want our first column to be at. Now that I've gotten this line drawn from this point, I'm going to move over to the right and just draw another line right there. So somewhere along this line is where that column's location is going to be. I'm now going to select another detail line, but this time I'm going to draw it from this structural face of the wall, and I'm going to come over 10 feet. Now I'm choosing 10 feet because that's a nice length for a typical piece of steel and the distance it might need to span from the foundation walls over to its next supporting object, which in this case happens to be this column we're getting ready to draw. Now where these two lines cross each other, that's where our column needs to be at. And the column that we're going to pick is going to be underneath the Home tab, the word column, and make sure it's an architectural column because we get a larger list of columns available to us when we select on that. And this kind of column is going to be an 8x8 rectangular column. Now the actual column, the thing that holds all this weight up, is much smaller. It's probably like 3 inches in diameter. The thing to know about that though is that we're picking an 8x8 column because this also includes the framing going around the column. The same kind of framing we have along our foundation walls right here and how we end up having gypsum wallboard on that framing. It's the exact same thing that's going to be going on with these columns. There's going to be wood boards on the inside of this with some gypboard surrounding it so that we don't actually see that round pole is what it looks like, a round metal pole going straight up and down inside of your nice finished basement area. So I'm going to come over here. And it's not going to snap right to it, but you'll see these lines around this sort of diamond shape. As long as I get that dead on like that, it's going to be in the right location. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. And we now have a column sitting in that location. Next, we want to make sure that the heights and properties of this column are correct. In order to do that, we need to select on the column and look over here underneath its properties. As far as its base offset, it needs to go down just a little bit in order to be able to get past that structural floor and be able to tie in to the footings that I'm going to have underneath there. So in order to do that, we're going to type in a -4-inch dimension, which by the way, happens to be the same thickness as that floor. Next, we have this top level and right now it's saying it's going to the porch. That's not right. It's going to need to go up to the top of foundation, just like the foundation walls, which are also supporting members, had to do. But there's a little bit extra that it has to go down. So in order to be able to accommodate that, we're going to need to put a dimension here for the top offset. Actually, I tell you what, let's change this from being the top of foundation to be the top of first floor. I know what that dimension is, and it's just going to be easier to do the math on it. And the math says that we need to do -1 foot 8 1/4. Now this math that I'm talking about, what it's really doing, it's allowing for such things as the thicknesses of the floor up above. It's going to be allowing for the steel beam that's going to be going from column to column to column and whatever its thickness happens to be. And once you start adding up each and every layer of materials, it ends up being 1 foot 8 1/4 down, and that's where our column needs to stop so it can support all that weight up above. So now that that's in place, the next thing we need to do is shut off the visibility of our floors. And the reason why we're going to do that is that we're going to be placing a footing on the underneath side of this column. And sometimes the floors can kind of get in the way of that and even make that footing being slightly a wrong location. So by turning off the visibility of the floors, we should be able to place it under there and get it to work just fine. To turn off the visibility of your floors, just come over here to the visibility graphics and click on the big edit button over here. Once you've clicked on that big edit button, we'll need to find floors and clear the check mark for it and just click on OK. And you'll notice that all the floors just shut themselves off. We also notice that if I come in here and I select on this line, we can go ahead and just delete these out because they're really not needed anymore now that we have our first column in the right location. Next, we need to put footings on the underneath side of this column. In order to accomplish that, I'm going to come up here to the Structure tab and pick this Isolated over the foundation. This 30 by 30 by 12 pile cap is the right size, so we're going to move it over here and wait till you see this blue X that shows up and just go ahead and click right there. It's going to tell us that we can't see it, but it is there anyway, so that's okay. Just hit Escape a couple of times to get out of the command. Next, we want to be able to see it. So underneath our properties here for the view, go to View Range and then the View Depth. Change that to be level below top of footing. Click on OK. And here we can see the column as well as the footing on the underneath side of it. From here, we can select on each of them. We can use the Copy command, and we can copy them over 10 feet each. So 10 foot. And 10 foot. Now we need to have another one just like it down here in order to support a couple of beams that we're going to have going from here on over to here. In order to accomplish that, I'm going to select on our Annotate tab again, select on Detail Lines, and start to draw in a couple of lines which are going to be our indicators as to where this needs to be drawn in at. So I'm just going to go flush from the face of this on over, and then from the middle of this wall on up. And where these lines cross, that's going to be our indicator as to where these should go. Now I'm going to select on the footings, select here, and I'm going to use the Copy command. I'm going to pick the midpoint up here, which is along the top of this line. I'm going to come down, and the reason why I was so specific is if we hit this intersection right now, we can now see that the front face of this lines up with the front face of our foundation walls, and it's also centered here in the space. Finally, in order to complete this process, we need to do a couple more things. One is underneath here, we're going to select on View Range again. We no longer need to see that deep, so we're just going to change this back up to the associated level basement. Also, we no longer need to not see the floors, so we'll go to that Visibility Graphics again, which is farther up on the list, click the Edit button, and then turn our floors back on. Now we can see our columns and we can see our floors. It's always important to remember to have an architect or engineer actually tell you where these columns need to be at. It's their job to be able to size these, tell you their spacing. But whenever you're getting ready to place these, though, you always have to remember that having clear spans like this is very difficult to do. You need to have shorter distances so that your structural members, your 2x12, your steel beams, don't start to bend and bow and perhaps even collapse, causing structural failure inside of your home.